Good morning, North America, good afternoon, Europe, and good evening to everyone watching in India. This is US Election Watch. I'm Allister coming to you live from Washington, D.C. The headlines. Harris's first big interview since getting that presidential nomination. Values not changed, Harris says, explaining her shift on key policy issues. Harris leads Trump by 4 points in the latest poll. 73% of Democrat voters excited after Harris's entry. Donald Trump slams Harris's CNN interview. America will become a wasteland, says Trump. Trump and Vance target Battleground, Pennsylvania today. Trump to also address a conservative parental rights group in D.C. Our top story, it took 5 long weeks and finally we got there. Now, Kamala Harris gave her first sit-down interview since Joe Biden stepped aside in the presidential race. Seated right next to Harris was Tim Walz, her running mate. Harris offered her most detailed explanation to date on why she's changed some of her positions. Here's more on Harris's 27-minute interview that has Americans and the world watching.
After facing criticism for barely engaging with reporters since becoming the Democratic presidential nominee, Kamala Harris finally sat down for a half-hour interview with CNN. Harris defended her shift in position on key issues such as immigration and fracking, emphasizing that her core values remained intact despite the shift. She said that her time as vice president provided new perspective on some of the country's most pressing issues. Harris once held more progressive immigration views during her campaign for president in 2020. She had previously advocated the closure of immigration detention centers and the decriminalization of illegal crossings. In the interview, she vowed a tougher approach to migration along the US southern border. Explaining her changed immigration view, she said that her travels across the country as vice president made her focus on building consensus.
Dana, I think the most important and most significant aspect of my policy perspective and decisions is my values have not changed. My value around what we need to do to secure our border, that value has not changed. I spent 2 terms as the Attorney General of California prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, violations of American laws regarding the illegal passage of guns, drugs, and human beings across our border. My values have not changed.
Harris found herself clarifying on another key issue, fracking, the process of using liquid to free natural gas from rock formations. The method is controversial, owing to claims of its residual health impact on communities. Harris had said in 2019 that there is no question she is in favor of banning fracking. In the interview, she said she had already changed her position on fracking in 2020. Trump had recently accused Harris of trying to hide her past opposition to fracking.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans.
Expanding on her comments made during the successful Democratic National Convention, she said that she would appoint a Republican to her cabinet. Kamala Harris has, for now, addressed the criticism she received about lack of press interactions. What remains to be seen is the kind of effect it has on opinion polls. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV.
For more, we're joined by former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Raymond Vickery. He's going to give us some of his insights on the interview that played out. Raymond, thanks for joining us this morning here. Let me start by asking you, was the interview boring? That was Trump's reaction on social media. He criticized Harris for rambling incoherently and said that he doesn't see her negotiating with the likes of President Xi of China. What would you say?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I thought that the most remarkable part of the interview was that it was so civilized, that it was civil. You didn't have any of the Trump bombast of trying to denigrate a person's racial background, saying they were dumb. You didn't have any of the J.D. Vance telling people to go to hell, that kind of thing. It was bipartisan, going to appoint a member of the cabinet from the other party, trying to build consensus. So I thought that that was all to the good. Now, Trump is a master of reality TV. That's where he comes from. Is it good television? Can we stir up emotions? Can we do divisiveness? That is his standard. That's the standard, though, it seems to me, that Kamala Harris and Waltz want to get away from. It's what America wants to get away from, in my opinion. So I thought that, yes, it was remarkable in how civilized it was, but that's a really good thing. And we don't need to always have the kind of bombast that a performer like Trump gives us.
Okay, so you're giving it the thumbs up. Now, Raymond, the other criticism has been that Harris should have done this interview alone, not have her running mate with her. She had Tim Walz, as you saw there. Some say for moral support and, in case she struggled or needed to make some sort of other valid point. Do you think that argument holds good? She should have just had a one-on-one instead?
Well, first of all, it's nothing unusual for a candidate who has been nominated to do their first interviews along with the vice president on the ticket. That's what Trump did with Pence. Of course, Pence has now said that he won't endorse Trump, and they've fallen out, but they did their first interview after he was nominated. So that's nothing unusual. The kind of criticism you're talking about plays into the racial stereotyping that Trump is trying to do. It's a dog whistle saying that people who are of African American descent are not smart enough to be able to do things on their own. That's not a good way to approach it. So I thought there was nothing unusual about it. And as you know, Waltz was silent for most of the time and was there to show unity within the Democratic ticket. So I think that's trying to make something out of nothing to criticize the fact that she didn't do it on her own.
Now, Raymond, you alluded to this in the interview. Harris suggested that she would appoint a Republican to her cabinet. In the past, we've seen this happen where the president appoints at least one cabinet post to the other party. But this didn't happen with Trump. It hasn't happened with Biden. What's the message really that Harris is trying to get across, do you think?
Well, the message is that we're one people, that you shouldn't demonize someone because they're a Democrat or a Republican, that we're Americans. And it is a good tradition, and there have been many instances in which having someone of a different political persuasion in the cabinet is a good thing. I'm sorry we've gotten away from that with Trump and with Biden. But it's a very clear signal that we're intending, that the Democrats are intending to reach across the aisle and work to bring about a unified America, which will be in the interest of India, the United States, and all democracies.
Right, thanks very much indeed. That was Raymond Vickery, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce there, joining us live here this morning on NDTV. Now, former U.S. President Donald Trump's back on the campaign trail with a rally in Pennsylvania later today. Trump has been trying to appeal to wider audiences. He has called for universal coverage of IVF treatment with no indications, though, on how his plan would work. At a town hall event in Wisconsin, he said, "We want to produce babies in the country right, just like he's doing with Wisconsin, which is a swing state." Trump's focus has been on others too, especially states he won in 2016, but really couldn't manage and lost with a very, very narrow margin in 2020.
While Kamala Harris visited the key swing state of Georgia this week, former US President Donald Trump wasn't too far behind, as he campaigned on Thursday in the key swing states of Michigan and Wisconsin. The 78-year-old used the opportunity to slam Harris, especially on key issues such as healthcare and immigration.
Kamala is promising communist-style price controls, free taxpayer-funded health care, not that you're going to want, nobody in this room is going to want it, for all illegal aliens, mass amnesty and citizenship for the millions and millions of migrants she lets in. She wants to give citizenship to people that have come here illegally. They didn't come through the system. You know, we want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally, right? They have to come in legally.
The Trump campaign has an intense focus on recapturing states he won in 2016, but lost narrowly in 2020. The 45th US president took to his social media platform, Truth Social, to roast Harris after her major interview on Thursday. It took Harris close to 40 days to sit down for a major interview after President Biden bowed out of the 2024 race on July 21st. On the other hand, Trump and his campaign quickly seized the opportunity and increased Trump's availability to the press. The latest polls paint a positive picture for Harris. The Reuters Ipsos poll says that Harris has widened her lead over Trump. Meanwhile, a separate Bloomberg Morning Consult poll says that she was either leading or tied with Trump in the swing states. With more than 2 months left in the final showdown, both candidates still have a chance. But Harris seems to be gaining momentum as opposed to Biden, who was struggling. According to a report, Matt Wolking, a former Trump campaign strategist, has said that running against Harris is more challenging for Trump, but it's certainly not insurmountable. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, joining us now for more on the stories, we're joined by Sampath Shivang. He's a Republican delegate. Thanks very much, Sampath, for joining us here this morning. Sampath, how big a concern are the polls for Trump's campaign? Yes, it's neck and neck. Yes, we still have 2 months before the elections, you might say, and lots really can change. They may not say it, but is this really making the Republican Party uneasy? Are they just uneasy, or are they in panic mode yet?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invite, and I enjoy being on NDTV. Yes, I was a delegate at the RNC convention in Wisconsin, where I was told that President Trump is behind the polls. But, initially, Harris is a new candidate. Trump campaign was preparing to face President Biden, and suddenly there's a change of face and personality. So I think they have to regroup and reconvene and find a new strategy how to combat Ms. Harris' popularity. But I've heard that she's had 4 to 5% in some states. But I think it is the initial response, and maybe 30 to 45 days, things will change. The Trump campaign strategy will change. And I think people will know I'm an Indian American.
40 days ago when Biden stepped aside, we heard. Yeah, 40 days ago when Biden stepped aside, we heard how Trump's campaign was looking at a strategy shift. And like you said, they should pivot now. But what should they do?
Of course, they have to regroup. And Mrs. Harris is, depending upon more Black American, African American votes. Of course, even President Biden would have contested. He would have gotten almost equal number of votes. That's the reason she does not even want to answer whether she has Indian descent or any background. She refused to ask that. She refused to answer that question. And I am sure you have seen in the interview, somebody asked her, what is your descent? Because Trump made a big issue out of it. and he went to national television's conference the other day. He asked whether she is Indian American or she is a Black American. She refused to answer that question. So still she wants to work on that issue. I don't think she is much worried about Indian American votes because there are hardly less than 2%. And if she says she's not Black American, she's going to lose 20 to 25% of votes. I think so. Her strategy may be right for her own good efforts.
But don't you think? But don't you think Sampath pulling out this whole card? She is black. She is a black of South Asian heritage as well. So this kind of backfired really in the media, where Trump is really polarizing people, where people are probably saying that why is this really an issue? She is black, so why are we even talking about this right now?
She's not straightforward on that. She's using according to convenience to her campaign. And remember on, I think, January 26th, she had a party in her home at Vice President's residence to celebrate India's Republican Day. She invited almost 100 Indian Americans to her home. What does it say? Why not President Biden did not invite, only she invited, because she wants to identify and she wants to use her Indian heritage. That is my feeling. I'm the first writer to bring this up 6 years ago, before she even was vice president. When she was a candidate for presidential candidate, I said, we're not against her, but if she says she's not Indian American, why do you want to enforce that issue on her? Leave her alone, and we can decide whom we should select, whom we should vote for.
Let's come back to the whole topic here of Trump, whether he needs to pivot his strategy. Let's take a look at how the campaign handled a recent controversy. We just want to update our viewers here. The U.S. Army, it issued a rare statement about what happened when Trump went to Arlington Cemetery a few days ago, which is not very far from D.C. The statement says, quote, participants in the ceremony were made aware of federal laws, Army regulations, and DoD policies which prohibit political activities on cemetery grounds. An ANC employee, that's the Army employee, who attempted to ensure adherence to these rules were abruptly pushed aside. So there was some kind of altercation there. Reports say Trump staffers were warned not to take photos in something called Section 60, the burial site for military personnel killed while fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. But yet, Trump was seen there posing for pictures in Section 60, posting that picture with a family of a fallen soldier and giving a thumbs up to the campaign photographer. So this is really blown up a bit here. So how do you think the Trump campaign handled this?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think probably President Trump, nobody exempt in America, whether he's a president or a ordinary civil servant or a citizen. All the laws are equal. There's no law about anybody. So Trump, it's possible that he was not aware of the rules, regulations, how to visit the cemetery and how to respond to the questions. I'm sure he was not briefed enough by his assistants or his personnel. I think it was a misstep on behalf of presidential group. I won't say president himself, ex-president himself, but it is possible. I agree with you that they should be more careful next time they do visit National Cemetery, which is very, very important role they play in American civil life or American military life.
Certainly. Sampath, we have Xenia Bell. She is a professor and political analyst with Cleveland State University. She's joining us now. Zina, if you could just give us what you think about this latest controversy about the Arlington cemetery and Trump's visit there, an altercation between an army staffer and an army personnel and Trump's staff, not going down too well in the media. How do you think the campaign handled that, the Trump campaign?
So interestingly, my apologies. Was that question for me? Allister,
Yes,
was that question for me? All right. So, I have been reading extensively about this, and NPR, the National Public Radio, covered this extensively. And that's why this story actually, well, they claim that's why this story got so much coverage. So one thing I'd like to point out is that per the guidelines of the cemetery, any political activity and using those grounds for political activity is not permitted, right? Trump went there to honor the servicemen, specifically the servicemen who passed away, who lost their lives when the United States exited Afghanistan. And those are those 13 servicemen, which has been one of the most horrific, I think, incidents against the US military in recent past under the Biden administration. So it was a big blow to the Biden administration. And of course, Trump wanted to play that up. And remember that Virginia is, of course, it's primarily a Democratic state. So there are all these factors, and the Trump campaign issued an official statement stating that, of course, they followed the guidelines. Trump was only there to honor those 13 servicemen who lost their lives. And, at the end of the day, Harris-Biden administration should be questioned regarding the safety of servicemen, given that, this was one of the most horrific attacks on servicemen in U.S. servicemen in recent history. So one has to consider some of these and how this is played out in the media, and how, sort of the photo op itself was used by Trump, and it was used in some of his political ads, and which is again a violation of the guidelines and the rules there. And one of the family men, I was listening to a family member who spoke about how they were disappointed in the Trump campaign, specifically because one of the graves there is of a serviceman who committed suicide, right? And the family member spoke out and said as to why rules and guidelines wasn't followed. And this shows, right, Trump's and his campaign's kind of rigorous attack on the Biden administration, and how, all these incidents and these photos are being used to target, the incumbent.
Zina Bell there, and of course Sampath Shivang earlier joining us for their insights on the Trump presidential campaign. Sorry, need to leave it there for now, but we'll chat with you at some other point in time for sure. Moving on now, former President Donald Trump has asked the U.S. federal court to intervene in his New York hush money criminal case. It seems Trump is seeking a path to overturn his felony conviction and delay sentencing indefinitely. Trump's lawyers also say the sentencing proceedings, which are currently scheduled for 7 weeks before Election Day, could constitute election interference. Here's more.
My honor to introduce the 45th and soon-to-be 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
As the 2024 U.S. presidential election campaign trail heats up, Trump's lawyers have sought the transfer of his hush money case into federal court. The plea comes on the heels of his sentencing by the Manhattan court, which convicted him of falsifying records to cover up a sex scandal 3 months prior. Trump is due to receive punishment for his conviction on the 18th of September, but this latest attempt at staving off the same could further complicate his legal team's earlier efforts at postponing sentencing. His counsel had asked Manhattan Court's Justice Merchant to delay sentencing till after Election Day on the basis of the Supreme Court's recent presidential immunity ruling. In their federal plaint, they have argued that the case itself runs afoul of the same judgment and should thus be transferred to a federal court. Trump's team, though, has its work cut out, as it has tried to use similar arguments in the past to no avail. As late as last year, Trump tried and failed to get his case transferred to federal court while also failing to get Justice Merchant removed from the hush money trial, all based on the same presidential immunity for official acts arguments. With just over 2 months to go to the November elections, it remains to be seen what impacts these efforts will have on Trump's electoral performance in the fall. Bureau Report for NDTV World.
That's all we have time for here on US Election Watch. I'm Allister D'Souza in Washington, D.C.